Okay, so welcome once again, Jane Tesner-Kleiner, the Lower Columbia Nature Network, the February meeting where we're talking about funding and fundraising to connecting our families and children to nature. And we're excited to welcome our partners today. We have several folks with us, including a couple of representatives from the Recreation and Conservation, RCO, which is a statewide organization that does lots of great grant work. Sheila is not able to join us, but I'll have slides for her. Ann DeGenis from the Community Foundation of Southwest Washington, Jason Lee from the Murdock Trust, Janelle Downs from the Washington Native Plant Society, Anna Wild from the Watershed Alliance of Southwest Washington, and Valerie Pufal from the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. So welcome to our partners and our panelists today. We are really grateful for you to join us. Today is really an opportunity for you to share with us the great work that you're doing, and also to learn about our partners who are doing our great work in our community to connect our families to nature. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Beth and to Kyle from RCO.
Great.
Welcome.
Thanks, Jane. And it's nice to meet you. Thanks for having us today. So my name is Kyle Guzlis. I am with the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. I'm the Grant Services Section Manager. I see a lot of names and I see a lot of faces that we have partnered with and provided grants for in the past. And so good to see all those faces as well, all the new faces on the screen. We do actually have some slides, Jane. Would it be okay if I shared my screen?
Absolutely. I'll stop sharing and I made you co-host, so go for it, Kyle. Thank you.
Okay. And we can cover OSPI's grant programs as well too, knowing that Sheila wasn't able to make the meeting today.
Great, thank you.
So I think folks can see my screen. You should see a picture with a bunch of really cute kids walking on a trail right now. Yep, I see thumbs up. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to cover the No Child Left Inside program first, and then Beth is going to come in after me and cover all of the OSPI outdoor learning grant programs. Second, we haven't attended these meetings in the past, so we didn't really know what to expect. I'm assuming like a Q&A portion is almost more valuable than me talking through a ton of slides. So maybe what we can just plan to do is I'll share some basic high-level information for NCLI first, and then open up for questions on NCLI, and then Beth will do the same for the OSPI programs, if that works for everyone.
Yeah, and we'll have time for lots of discussion after the panelist presentations.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great, thanks.
All right, so No Child Left Inside. So for those of you that don't know, it's a grant program that the funding actually goes to Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. It was created back in 2007. It had one successful grant round there in 2008 and funded about 30 programs across the state and had extreme demand at that time. But then the recession hit the state, and state government and funding really dropped. So it went away. In 2015, there was a big push with our current governor and a Blue Ribbon Task Force on outdoor recreation that kind of revitalized NCLI. So came back in 2016, and I think we're in our 5th grant cycle. Now it runs on the biennial cycle, so every 2 years. And it's been growing strong ever since being brought back. So what's the purpose? So really pretty simple program purpose: to provide underserved youth with quality opportunities to experience the natural world, and then to empower local communities to engage youth in outdoor education and recreation experiences, focusing on serving youth with the greatest needs. And so that's a key piece I just want to point out is NCLI funding, the grant funds, can be used for more curriculum-based programs that are working with schools, but it can also be just for direct recreation programs like summer camp programs or parks and recreation department programs. It's got a lot of variety for the types of projects that are eligible to come in. This is the funding history since it was revitalized back in 2015. And so if you look at that, the chart on the bottom left, you can see the amount of applications has kind of been pretty consistent, but also grown throughout the years. And taking into account the pandemic kind of coming in there in the last 3 to 4 years. But this year we actually had our highest application requests that we've ever had. We've had 174 applications that came in requesting just over 12.3 million. Currently in the governor's budget for funding for the next year, there's 4.5 million that is being proposed for funding NCLI. So it's a very competitive grant program. There's clearly a lot of demand. And because of that, there are a lot of groups, many of whom are on this call, that are working with our state legislature and legislators throughout the state to really prioritize and make strategic investments into NCLI. So the hope is that as applications of demand grow, so does funding allocations from the legislature. So we'll kind of see, as you all know, we're in a legislative session right now. So they are charged with figuring out all of those funding priorities as we speak. So there's 3 different funding tiers. This is just showing a breakdown of the applications that came in this year. We accept applications every 2 years. It'll be in even numbered years. So these applications all came in 2022. They're due November 1st of those years, every 2 years. And then they're funded the beginning of the next state biennium, which is, for this one, it'll be July 1 of 2023. And then all the programs, it's basically a 2-year grant. So you have 2 years to conduct your outdoor programming. Let's see, it's operational funding. So there's no, we can't extend that into the next biennium. It really is tied down to being spent within that time. There's 3 different funding tiers. Tier 1 is really, it was created several years ago when we did some policy updates to the program. And at the time, the state parks director really wanted to encourage more startups around the state to have a funding opportunity. So the tier 1 concept was developed. It's for smaller grants. It only goes up to 25,000 in total request, but it doesn't require any match. So there's no match needed on that one. And then also, if you've received a No Child Left Inside grant in the past, you're not eligible for tier 1. So it's kind of separating out who can apply for it. So it's not competing against the same organizations year after year, which you will find in tier 2 and tier 3. On the previous slide, I showed you the demand there. We have a lot of return customers applying for the funds. There's so many groups throughout the state doing all the awesome work that you're doing. And this has been critical piece of funding for those through the years. And so it's a lot of return customers, but then also a lot of new programs coming back in. Tier 2 are for grants up to 75,000, and they have a matching requirement of 25%. And match can take the form of all different ways. It can be cash, obviously, but it can also be in-kind contributions. It can be donations. It can be volunteer hours being logged and tracked on a project. So even though there's that 25% required matching share, we're pretty helpful in helping organizations figure out how to come up with those matching dollars based on the program that they're already doing or planning to do. And then finally, tier 3 are for larger grants that go up to $150,000. Tier 1 and tier 2 grants, it's a written application only. So you're submitting your materials in our grant database, which is called PRISM. And then tier 3, you submit a written application, but then you also do a presentation in front of the advisory committee, who ultimately will be scoring the project, which creates the rank lists. Let's see. I can open up for questions. That's like, oh, how about like eligible applicants? Just about anyone can apply for NCLI. So the bulk of the applicants that we see coming in are nonprofits, but we fund plenty of school districts. We fund plenty of conservation districts, other state agencies, I would say are the key ones, as well as tribal governments. Technically, an individual could apply for No Child Left Inside funding. They are eligible. That being said, you are going to be held, if a grant is awarded, to standard provisions for grant contracting with the state of Washington. So all the liability, insurance, and coverage, and all those are going to be required within your contract. So it can get a little bit difficult for individuals, if they are awarded a grant, to actually get into compliance with all the requirements in the contract. So that's why we predominantly see nonprofits coming in for the funding.
And Kyle, these are reimbursement grants, right? So you have to have the money up front.
They are great, Jane. That is really good, and that's why I like questions so much, because they they pose the right questions. So yeah, it's reimbursement. So you spend the money first, you submit proof of spending that funding, and then RCO reimburses you for the costs. And really, I didn't mention it there in the beginning when I talked about state parks, but when state parks brought the program back in 2015, they turned to another state agency, the Recreation and Conservation Office, who we're an agency that predominantly just manages grant programs. We offer over 40 different types of grants, these outdoor education programs being a couple examples of them. And we have systems set up to manage grants. So we've had this relationship with Washington State Parks now since 2015 to administer the grants on their behalf. But just to reemphasize that it is a Washington State Parks grant program. It's a very similar relationship with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and their grant program. So it's their grant program, but they're turning to RCO to help with the administration of the funds. So that's kind of RCO's role in the process.
Awesome. Thank you for that great overview, Kyle. We did put the link to that grant in the chat box, and there is a great grant manual that provides lots of great details as well.
Yeah, the grant manual really is where you'll go to find all the questions on, like, eligibility of costs, types of programs. NCLI can pay for just about anything when it comes to program fees. So it's your staffing, transportation, food and lodging, contracted services. All those are good. The one thing NCLI does not pay for is facility construction. So it can't build new outdoor facilities. Like if you wanted to build a ropes course or something like that, NCLI funds can't pay for that, but they can pay for the programming and the staff to do programming on ropes courses.
Great. Thank you. Right. We're going to hold questions until we get through our panelists, if that's okay. So make notes if you need to, but thank you, Kyle. Anything else? And then we can pass it on to Beth.
No, I think if something else comes up, I'll jump in with Beth too. And Beth, I don't know, did you have anything that you wanted to add on to NCLI that I?
No, I think we'll see what comes up in the questions later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Beth Auerbach, and she's going to cover the OSPI grant programs.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So RCO also manages outdoor learning grants. We do have a whole lot of in-house grants, but our outdoor learning, our youth education learning grants are not in-house. So as Kyle mentioned, No Child Left Inside is funding from Washington State Parks that RCO administers, because we are a granting agency and we're set up for that. Outdoor learning grants are separate. They are money from the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. RCO manages that program, and I'll get into how it was created. Kyle, will you go to the next slide, please? So it's from House Bill 2078 that was passed last year. And essentially, Time Outdoors helps children thrive. You all know this. And access to the outdoors is not equitable. Something else you all know, I'm sure. Next slide, please, Kyle. So because of those two reasons, House Bill 2078 was created, and it's essentially three buckets. One bucket is managed by the Association of the Washington Schools Principals. Within that, they have the Outdoor Schools Washington program. That is the 4th, 5th grade overnight experience where kids go to Cispus or Islandwood or all over, there's schools all over that they go to for 3 to 5 nights. So they got a portion of the 2022 funding, the biggest portion, as you can see. And then the other two buckets, one stayed with OSPI to be managed by them, and that's the one that Sheila is managing. That is where school districts can apply for funding through OSPI's I-Grant program. And that money goes directly to school districts. And then the third is the money that came to RCO to manage. And so that is the competitive grant program. It currently runs on a yearly basis. We're pretty sure. We just ran the 2022 program cycle, and we are hopefully gearing up for the new one. We're waiting to see how everything shakes out. But we had just shy of 2 million for this current funding cycle. And that is a competitive grant program that is open to organizations and agencies that partner with schools. And so next slide, please.
Hey, Beth, can I add just one piece on this slide
Yeah.
before we go on? So this first bucket here for the overnight outdoor school experiences. So this is school districts, and schools are the ones that are eligible for this pot of funds for 5th and 6th grade overnight experiences. The second pot, again, only school districts are eligible in this one. And this is for funding that can be for any age. So it could be for, kindergartners, first graders, middle schoolers, high schoolers. Again, only districts are eligible for this funding. And then the one that Beth is going to cover here in the next few slides, this is for outdoor education providers. And the way that is defined is state agencies, nonprofit organizations, and federally recognized tribes are who are defined as outdoor education providers in the way the program was run this last cycle. So school districts don't apply for funding in this third bucket.
Yep. And similar to No Child Left Inside, there are differences in we have a slide to get into that. It is programmatic funding, so it also does not cover facilities at this time. Next one. All right. So the key objective of the outdoor learning grants, which is the name of the one RCO administers, is to provide grants to develop and support outdoor educational experiences for students in Washington public schools. All of the photos that you're seeing are active OLG for short, funded projects right now. So for the inaugural year, we had $8 million in grant requests from 72 applications, but we had 1.85 million for those projects. So that funded 16.75. That funded 17 projects. The last one wasn't completely funded, but really close. And they're scattered through a lot of the state, as you can see. And Valerie will be talking later about her project, I believe. Next one. Oh, and this is, I think, our final slide. So some big key takeaways is that No Child Left Inside, Washington State Parks, funds can go toward all experiences that get youth outdoors. And Outdoor Learning Grants is OSPI, and it's a competitive grant program for education providers that are partnered with schools or districts. So some of those 17 funded projects are partnered with one school, and they're working with 30 kids every week for the school year. Some of them are partnering with many districts across a wide range, and they're working with thousands of students, but for 3 hours. We have a smattering, which is really cool. I think that wraps it up. Kyle, do we have one more?
I think it's just questions, but it sounds like we're going to take all those at the end. So hold those questions. The two programs that RCO manages here, it can get confusing between them. And so if you have questions, feel free. We will do our best to bring some clarity to that for you at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle and Beth, so much. Your pictures are so inspiring. We really appreciate it. And if you want to put your emails, feel free to put your email contact in the chat box as well if folks want to reach out to you directly. But I know your information is also on your websites as well. So we did put those web links in there.
Jane, can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
Something that can be really useful for folks who want to submit applications to either of those programs would be you can look at the specifics, like briefs about projects that are funded, and you can even go in and look at their budgets. You can see a lot of things actually about current and past projects, and that can be really helpful to get a sense of what projects have been successful in both of those programs. So I would highly encourage folks who are interested in applying to do some of that research of current projects.
That's great. Thanks for adding that, Valerie. So our database where you apply for funding, it's pretty forward facing. So you can see all the projects that applied in previous years. You can see the ones that were funded. You can look pretty much at all the elements inside their application materials. So it really is open and available for you to see that information. And there's no better way to learn about a grant program than to see what types of projects it's funding. So you can see, go to our website. You'll see there'll be links on there for the rank lists in previous years. And then if you want to get into the PRISM system, you can request to have login. And we can help out. You can actually view pretty much all the information without even getting a login to our database as well. So if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle and Beth, so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and expertise. Next up, we have Ann DeGenis with the Community Foundation of Southwest Washington. Ann, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. When the screen changed there, I just lost all my notes on my screen. I don't know what happened, but so I'm going to kind of wing it here a little bit. So the Community Foundation, I recognize several of you from the on the call here, so I know some of you know what we do. So the Community Foundation primarily serves the geographic area of Southwest Washington. And we define that as Clark, Cowlitz, and Skamania counties. And we primarily fund that through our discretionary grant making program. So that's a program that nonprofits apply to twice a year. And that particular program is focused on intergenerational poverty. So how organizations are making a case for breaking that cycle of intergenerational poverty. So that's a small part of our funding. Most of our funding comes through our donor advised funds. And that's what I primarily work with. I work with our living donors. So we have about 80% of our funding comes from donor advised funds. So those are individuals and families that we're working with to try to match their community needs up with their charitable interests. So I spend a lot of my time working with nonprofits and trying to keep abreast of the programs. They have leadership changes, staffing changes. The more I know, the more I can pass along to our donors. We help the community in many different ways. There's the funding part, which is a large part. And there's, we convene, we're trying to convene a lot of community leaders. It could be around issues. We have quite a few, some of our larger funds focused on homelessness and affordable housing right now, mental health services. So, we try to bring experts together that know a whole lot more than we do, so we can learn and everybody can learn about the best ways to address the issues that are taking place in our community. We have about 300 we have almost 400 charitable funds right now and probably about 400 million in assets. And through our discretionary grant making program that I mentioned earlier, we probably grant about a little over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. And then about 15 million, I think, through our other funds. We have many funds that are designated, so people have left us in their estate plans. So we work a lot with professional advisors and their clients on their legacy giving. So those are just designated funds. We have a lot of different kinds of funds that money goes out of, and some of those our staff also has some discretion over. So aside from the nonprofits applying to our community giving fund for grants, we also have discretion to fill those in that we can't fund. I think Beth mentioned earlier, you get a lot more requests than you have money to give away. And so I work with our program staff to try to fill in some of those gaps from donor advised fund dollars as well. But the bottom line is, the more I know about nonprofits and what they're doing in the community, the more I can pass along to our donors. And, I also like to try to get donors out to nonprofits when it's appropriate. And I would much rather have them visit with the direct service providers that know the most, and so they can see what's happening within that space that they're interested in potentially funding. My notes. I think I may add something later, I'll wait till questions. I'm going to see if I can bring my notes up again, but we provide a lot of capacity building for nonprofits. We've started that probably the last 5 years. So we are big supporters of unrestricted grants, whether that's through donor advised fund or through our competitive grant making. Multi-year grants, we do quite a few of those. Matching fund grants sometimes. We really try to really listen to what the nonprofits need. We tried never to be prescriptive. 20 years ago, we were more so that way. So we've learned a lot over the years. So we want to hear from you what works from nonprofits, what works best for them, and work with them when they have challenges to make the program or project work. So I think that's all I have for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you're super busy, but and we also know that your agency has done so much for our region, and your donors have given so much. We greatly appreciate your time and your expertise today, and we look forward to the discussion with you after.
Thank you. We feel fortunate to work with those that are helping the community so much, that's for sure.
Awesome. Great. Well, there's some great nonprofits on the call today, so hopefully we can connect you all after the call. Next up, we have Jason Lee from the M.J. Murdock Charitable Trust. Jason, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Jane, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to get to know everyone here on the panel, as well as the organizations that are here today. And if it's okay, if I could share my screen, I do have a slide to better navigate our grants. Can we do that? Awesome. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so my name's Jason Lee. I'm our grant relations manager at the Murdock Trust. We're located in Vancouver, Washington. I've been here for 8 years and had a variety of experience in fundraising and working in the education space, as well as arts and culture. And really our mission, as we are a private funder, is to enrich the quality of life in the Pacific Northwest by providing grants in our enrichment programs and even convenings to organizations to really strengthen the region's educational, spiritual, and cultural base in creative and sustainable ways. Most of the primary basis of our work comes from our donor, Jack Murdock, who was a former co-founder of a company called Tektronix in Oregon. And he died in a tragic float plane accident as he was an aviator, but really all of his assets went towards the trust, reaching 91 million. And just through growing it through investments and equities, that has grown to date over to 1.7 billion, whilst throughout our last 48 years, we've given away 7,800 grants totaling more than $1.3 billion. And so our average grant award size comes between $250,000 to $350,000, depending on the organization, whether they are new, and depending on the sector, as they can sometimes go upward to $1 million in the request in itself. Our sectors are quite wide, as we don't just have a focus on nature or conservation to the natural world, though we do give grants in that space. Our focus is primarily on human services, education, healthcare, arts and culture, and scientific research. And there's a lot of subsectors underneath all of those. So it seems like come one, come all. And our region is quite wide, as we also not only serve Washington, but also Alaska, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. So we do get quite a amount of requests. When I first started, it's about 60 applications per quarter. We go on a quarterly basis, and we have no deadlines whatsoever. And we consider ourselves as a premier capacity building type funder. So really, when in your right time, or even as an organization, of when do you really want to get to that next level, whether it be through staff and I can have another slide on this for later, but it's just building upon what's new to the organization. Our strategic funding preferences are primarily around the CEO and executive directors, or even board's highest priority. We do infrastructure, as I said, capacity building, new assets to the organization, and those that are really transformative, leveraging new opportunities and innovative in the sector. So our buzzword is strategic capacity building here. The three types of funding that we do are capital, program and staff, and equipment and technology. So we consider these as three individual buckets. We don't do cross-funding within a single application. We rather you focus just on one, as these are quite large in requests. And what we often do is a lot of cost sharing in this, that we don't cover a lot of this, but for capital, let's say, whether it be a new construction, renovation, or even leasehold improvements, purchases of land or building, that we often are the end funders in these large campaigns, or for those who know, top off funding, which we typically do. So we prefer to see around 30 to 40% of the total project costs either in hand or committed. And for those who are under leases, those who have long-term leases, if you're making some new additions to your facilities. The second, we do program and staff. So whether they be new programs or expanding on existing programs, and a lot of the applications we get are typically for the staff positions or positions in itself. We primarily look at those higher level, so not so much for administrative or support level positions, and we really look at net FTE gain to the organization. So typically a 0.5 minimum FTE or full-time equivalent. And we are committed to a 3-year grant on this one alone, not on the other buckets, but just for program and staff. So we do fund 100% the first year and then decline back 67 into 33% in the third year. And then on to our last bucket for equipment and technology. About 10-year life, as examples as displayed here, like we've done broadcast production equipment, boilers, or even for camps. We're known to be septic tank funders. That is not the sexiest thing to fund, but we know that's really vital to really expand a camp, is for bathrooms and those kind of systems. And whether it be for technology, whether it's the physical instrument in itself within your on-site premise, or it could be digital, but really for those really long life items. And these are often up to a 50% cost share, which would mean the instrumentation or the tech alone would have to be $100,000 minimum total cost. Projects we typically don't consider, like existing operational support, indirect costs, or reimbursement. those with projects like for capital, let's say routine maintenance or replacement of these short life, highly depreciable items. We don't often do event or performance underwriting, loans, debt reduction, and that such. Planning, research, or study-based projects, and really our very minimum ask amount is $50,000. And as I said before, most of these projects presented to the trust are sizes of 100,000, which can you imagine for some smaller organizations, that's pretty tough to get to. We do recommend for those that are new to the nonprofit space or as a registered 501c3 to at least have 3 years of operational history. We don't do too much with government groups or, but there's been some use cases. So present your best case and we could talk it through. And if you want to have a conversation, whether after this meeting or at some time in the future, and you want to present a project, I'd love to speak with you. Our review process and time frame, we start with a letter of inquiry or LOI. This is all through our online grant system. And like I said, because we're on a quarterly basis, much to my own chagrin, it takes a bit longer than other funders that I think our website claims 4 to 7 months, and just based on the volume of applications that we're getting, it has sometimes been 6 to 7 months. And depending on the turnaround time with the LOI, it could take upward to a year to get a decision. And we do that just because we consider ourselves as a relational funder. We really want to step alongside of what you're doing and how you're operating. And that just takes a lot of time for us as a regional funder to get a deep understanding of all the great organizations within the 5 states. So this is kind of just a walkthrough. We do site visits. We want to get to know what you're doing, whether physically at your space or virtually. We like to get to know someone from your board, and because a lot of these big strategic moments happen are from the board level, and that's where we want to know where the leadership stands in a lot of these big decisions. Our assessment is primarily around organizational health and the project preparation. So what is the status of the leadership? Where are you taking careful financial planning in mind? Are you financially sound and growing? Is your board stewardship centric, whether in philanthropy or you have other teams? And so it's just really getting the big picture in mind of what you're doing as an organization, how you intend to scale or address these community issues as we just move from time to time. What is the cultural moment for you to address this? And as well as thinking of the long term of executing these big projects. We have lots of great resources. I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. We try to be as transparent as possible. Everything's on our website. If there's nothing covered in our website, feel free to open up questions later on. And just thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jason. That was a really great overview. And I know that you also have lots of great videos on your website to help explain some of the processes too. So thank you for that.
Of course, thank you.
Glad you could join us today. Okay, so next up, we have from the Washington Native Plant Society, we have Janelle Downs. We are grateful that you could join us today. Thank you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll just speak the mission of the Washington Native Plant Society, and that's pretty obvious that we promote the appreciation and conservation of Washington's native plants and their habitats through study, education, and advocacy. And we're really, I'm here to talk about probably 2 things today. Our small grant program, and I will also mention another program that we have fostered over the last 2 years. And I'm sorry I don't have any slides, but we have a very small budget for the grants that are funded in-house, and those are funded through basically our membership donations. And we each year award grants for education, conservation, research, and inventory. Those 3 things. I think this group would primarily be interested in the grants for education However, if you had a group that was interested in doing a restoration project with students, that might fall under our conservation grant program. So we grant amounts between $500 and $2,000. So many of our grants go to either individual schools or teachers who are interested in having an in-classroom or out-of-classroom project. There can be curriculum development, but there can also be outdoor activities that are funded through this. We also fund a lot of public education projects. So other nonprofit groups come to us for looking for money for signage, for incorporating native plants in their projects or in their community gardens. A couple of the more recent things that have happened over the past 3 or 4 years, we often fund native plant gardens on school grounds. So one such project was in Spokane, where the 5th and 6th grade environmental education club in one of the public schools, the Hutton Elementary, put together a community garden and did all the research and so forth to install native plants and signage. Another one that we just funded over this past year was in Gardner Environmental School, where they're developing a native plant teaching garden on the school property. So we do have resources on our website that are available for students and teachers that can help them include native plant information in their curriculum. The other project that I would like to say a little bit about that has been funded in-house by the Native Plant Society through requests and donation is the youth education through ecological restoration program. We call it YEAR. And that is, it engages middle school science students as restoration ecologists to restore land in either their own schoolyard or their community. They have guidance through WNPS chapter members, and also a curriculum that's been developed, a 4-week curriculum on ecological restoration for their area that's taught by their classroom teacher in coordination with our YEAR coordinators. We have a West Side effort and an East Side effort right now with 2 different coordinators. And they partner with a middle school. The kids do investigations, modeling readings, other hands-on activities, and figure out that a native plant ecosystem would form the foundation of complex food webs. They're given a challenge to increase biodiversity in their restoration area. And then they write actual ecosystem restoration proposals for their site. We have activities going on the east side here at some of the smaller schools that serve underrepresented minorities in Patterson and Mattawa, also in Pasco. There are also West Side programs, and I believe that I'm less familiar with those. I know that Federal Way is going to be hoping to participate, and possibly the city of Vancouver as well. And there are others. And Mark, if you remember, you can jump in, and I see that Mark Watron is also here. He's also on the education committee. So in summary, I would just say that Native Plant Society, we feel a need for very small grants for teachers and the public to be able to implement often outdoor activities and things that teach folks about their native flora. We offer grants from kindergarten through college. Some of those grants go to universities who want to install teaching gardens on their, or natural resource laboratories, you know, on their campuses. So, and I'll leave it at that. So very small amounts in comparison to what the other folks are doing here. We will be looking to figure out how to continue to fund the youth ecology or education restoration program in follow-on years. So thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Janelle.
Janelle. Jane, can I chime in?
Please do, Mark.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, great. So thanks, Janelle, for presenting those. And I wanted to highlight two local ones. Lauren School that has an ongoing native plant garden. Now I think going on close to its 10th year of use, and was the scene of school-wide Earth Day celebration last year using the native plants out there. And then the interpretive signage out at the Casey Center, which has probably had 15 years or more of student field trips that use that. In fact, just last week, we had fifth graders out using the WNPS cycle of renewal diagram. And so incorporating those educational materials. And I would add one more thing. Janelle's being modest about maybe they're small grants, but they also don't have always tons of competition. And I actually think if you're looking for a small grant opportunity, you got some pretty good odds with the Washington Native Plant Society.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Thank you, Mark. And the one other thing I wanted to, that I think I didn't mention, is that in through the year program, these students actually go in and install the plants. They learn a bunch of native plants, they go in and plant them, they go in and weed these gardens. So they spend a significant amount of time outdoors. And after the first year, we got incredibly positive feedback from their teachers about the work that the kids had done and how enthusiastic they are about it. So I meant to mention that. Anyway, enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janelle and Mark. And small grants are just as impactful as the big ones, especially when kids can get that hands-on project-based experience. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Next up is Anna Wild from the Watershed Alliance of Southwest Washington. Welcome, Anna.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. The Watershed Alliance is a nonprofit based in Vancouver. Our mission is to empower community members to protect and restore Southwest Washington's waterways and natural areas for the benefit of current and future generations. So we do that mainly through volunteer events, like many of you know about or have attended. We also do creekside restoration projects, but we also have an outreach component, and that's where our grant program comes in. So our neighborhood grant program is what it's called, and it's funded through our partnership with the City of Vancouver. So grants can be up to $2,000. It's the maximum, and we do require a 100% match, which can be cash or in kind through the volunteer labor of, building whatever it is you want to build. So what the grants can fund is pretty open. And anyone can, have an idea and do the actual writing, but the grant has to be submitted by a City of Vancouver neighborhood association. And so the geographic boundaries are the City of Vancouver as well. Other requirements are that it has to benefit the neighborhood. And so it can't just benefit one person. And it has to have an environmental and community focus. The work has to be done on public property. There's possible exceptions to that if there's multiple properties that are having, like, say, an invasive tree issue or something. But that's the exception. Everything else has to be done on public property. Like I said, it's pretty open, so you can have a lot of different ideas, but typical projects that are funded through this program could be something like a Friends of Trees planting in your neighborhood. So we would work with Friends of Trees to offset the cost of that and work with the neighborhood association to do that. The invasive tree removal, like I mentioned, more commonly, it's things like nature play areas or community gardens or plantings in public areas in the neighborhood. The application form is available on our website. It's a pretty simple form. It's not time consuming, so that's good. Let's see, a good example of what we have funded in the past is something like the Landover Charmel Neighborhood Association, who built a community garden. So we were able to help them with the materials and some signage, and they provided the labor to actually build the garden. And it was a great project. It was really fun to work on. With that, I think I will leave it and answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And the picture on the screen is one of the 3 projects you funded in the Hauk neighborhood. That's the butterfly garden that has gotten hundreds of students out accessing nature in the Hauk neighborhood. So personally grateful for your contributions to that.
Wonderful. It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, thank you. Last panelist today is Valerie, who's a recipient of one of the grants. So Valerie is going to give us the perspective of a grant recipient, and then we'll have lots of time to open it up for questions and answers to our panelists after that. So Valerie, welcome.
Thanks, Jane. It's maybe more than a grant recipient is someone who is writing a lot of grants. That's probably more accurate because I know so many of you on this call are doing that also. And I think the first thing that I want to acknowledge is, as you might be able to hear in my background, there's a number of people who work here where I work. And for some of you, you have super small organizations and you don't necessarily have people who are dedicated to write a lot of grants and find a lot of funding. And so I just want to acknowledge that it takes a lot of time and that we all have limited time. And so, you know, a huge portion of my role here is to seek out funding opportunities and to write grants and participate in a lot of different grant programs, and recognizing that it is competitive so much of the time, and we're not going to win every competition, right? And that for so many of these programs, that the feedback that you can receive from not getting something funded can be just as valuable for you to be more successful the next time in that program. As I mentioned earlier about the RCO program, being able to really do the research and read what is getting funded in those programs, it's also point-based, so you can see how different projects scored. You get to see how your own project scored, and that's super helpful to be able to come back in the next cycle and be able to really bolster your proposal in certain ways to try and meet the priorities of the program. There's a few programs, I mean, there's so many different grant programs, right? And we're only talking about a few today, but in the state of Washington, another one that there's a number of programs through the Department of Ecology. Our education program has received a number of those grants over the years. So, and they are structured, although with different priorities, similarly in a point system as the RCO grant. So there's also a lot of information about those, a similar kind of transparency where you can really see what projects are getting funded and who's being successful and why. So I don't necessarily want to take up a whole bunch of time because I want there to be questions. And I think specifically to the outdoor learning grant, which we were successful at getting our project funded this year. Again, like Beth talked about, this is the first year of this program. I think we're all learning a ton. The application period was really short and rapid for those of you who also applied, and how you understand that. And so I think a huge part, most likely in this first round, was who can actualize their project this year, who can spend all of this money in this year. And I think that is, although not a priority, of the stated priority in the grant guidelines was, I'm sure, really important to the folks who were trying to determine who was in a position to really actualize their project. So everybody's going to look different. The last thing I'll say is that all of the partnerships that you have can be a huge strength in your proposal. So, the partnerships that you might have with schools, with land owners, whether that's the county that you are in, or whether it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, like there's a number of different entities, and having letters of support and crossing all of, like answering every single question that they really want to hear from you, all of those are super important. I think demonstrated partnership can go a really long way. And in the other side, once you receive grants, there's a ton of work that happens on that end too, as those of you know who are participating in this process. So it's one thing to get a letter of support, and it's another thing to actualize that partnership in the ways that you idealized it. And so that is a really fun part of things, but a really cool opportunity. So I'll leave it there. Look forward to folks' questions, and I'm happy to, if you want to reach out to me after the meeting independently, you're welcome to do that as well.
That's great, Valerie. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. In many of our partners on the call and other regional and national organizations also have grants to support the work that we do. And if you're not familiar with the work that we do, we know the health and well-being benefits from connecting with nature, especially on a daily basis, is so amazing. And there's lots of research and data that proves that the nature connections are so important to our health and well-being. Our partners at Clark County Public Health has a Clark County Green Schools website. And they have a grants page as well. So if you want to check out their website, Sammy Springs, I don't know if Sammy's on the call today. She usually joins us. She manages that webpage. Federal resources include the Children in Nature Network, has a really great resource page for them. I'll put all these links in the chat here when I'm done talking. They, especially the COVID relief funds, have been used extensively to connect kids to nature through schools and local community projects. EPA has a number of grants that are available. So if you're tying to curriculum, like green stormwater infrastructure projects that connect kids to their science standards, there's some great EPA grants out there. Valerie mentioned the ecology has grants. And then our regional businesses have a long history for supporting projects like what you do to get kids outside. So Patagonia, Columbia, Keene, et cetera. We're really fortunate in our region to have some amazing outdoor industry businesses that also have their own granting or community donation entities as well. So there's lots of resources out there. I'm going to stop sharing at this time. Sorry, hit the wrong thing. Stop sharing, Jane. I'm going to open it to everybody to have a discussion now. There are a couple of questions that popped up in the chat that might have been answered in the chat. I'm going to scroll through really quick, but one question was for Anne. Do you grant to WSU or educational institutions? And the answer was yes. So thank you for that answer in the chat. I'm going to scroll through here. It sounds like there might be a couple questions for Beth and Kyle. From Ian. Ian, you want to ask your question? I'll give you the floor. And you're muted. There you go.
Sure. I think, I mean, I put them in the chat, but I think, our work is school gardens, on school grounds. And I think I sort of get the sense that sometimes like that outdoor education, sometimes what we're meaning is, going out to the woods and doing, field trips or camps or that sort of thing. And so I know that we applied for No Child Left Inside 3 times and it was rejected, and that was because of our dose, which is sort of like, how impactful is the experience. And if you're at I mean, I'm extrapolating a little bit, but if you're at camp, immersed in the woods and stuff, for a couple days, like that's a really deep, powerful experience. And ours is sort of spread thinner over 20 schools. So I was sort of curious. Just sort of wondering, like, should we keep working at it, or is it really not a good fit? And sort of kind of the same question for the OSPI RCO outdoor learning grant.
Yeah, I can start maybe on answering the questions, Ian, and thank you. And sorry to hear that you haven't been funded in the past. And by no means, I wouldn't use the word rejected. We really, in NCLI, there are no bad projects. There just isn't enough funding to go through all of them is a way I like to think of it. And I don't know, without pulling up the specifics of the applications and really looking at how you scored on individual criteria, all the elements that came into how you scored, but we can definitely set up a time to go through that and talk with you. That really is Beth's role in this process is, she not only manages projects that are funded, but she's there for technical assistance in the application side of things as well. So definitely reach out on that piece. I would say NCLI, because it is so competitive, where we could have in the previous biennium, we had 4.5 million. I think we had roughly about 8.5 million of requests in that year. So we funded about 60% of the projects that came through, which was the highest percentage that we've ever had. I mean, we've had years in NCLI where we've only been able to fund as low as 17% of the applications that have come in. So it is extremely competitive. And because of that, some of the elements of like, who are you serving really matters. NCLI is without a doubt prioritizing underserved youth throughout the state of Washington. And so those metrics and those populations within your community are typically some of the driving factors. On average, we probably see somewhere in the, anywhere from 60 to 70% of the youth that funding goes to. So the funding that goes to organizations, they're serving youth that are at least 60 to 70% eligible for free and reduced price meals. And same could be for high populations of youth of color as well. And so I think when putting together potential programs for NCLI, you would really want to focus on those underserved populations for this pot of funding, because it is going to prioritize it by that.
Yeah, Ian, please do reach out to me. I know that a lot of work goes into these applications and it's disheartening, but we do have, like, the tier 1 list is very long every year because people who don't get funded can apply there and they keep coming back until they're funded and they tweak their programs in the meantime. And that's part of my job, is to help you figure out how to fit in better into this funding program. We do have school gardens that do receive funding, so I don't think that you can make a blanket statement. So I'd love to see you come back. I'd love to see Laura Plout come back. There's a lot of really cool work going on. Both of you also work with schools. So I think OLG would also be a great place for you to investigate. So yeah, my email's in there, but I'm happy to put it on again if you'd like to chat about strategies for next time.
Thanks. I appreciate that from both of you. That's helpful.
Yeah, and definitely on the OLG side, because I see that you had the kind of the secondary question on that is, there's the funding that education outdoor providers are eligible for that we administer, but the schools that you're working with could also receive funding to work with you as a partner. So there's a couple different ways that you could look at it. In this past year, the I grants, which was when Beth had that slide of the 3 different funding pots, the one that is managed by OSPI that isn't for 5th and 6th grade overnight experiences, that wasn't nearly as competitive. And while it's called a grant, it's really more allocation based. So really the schools just need to fill out an application and reach out to OSPI, and likely they were receiving funding on that. So it might be good if you have those strong relationships with schools And you could even help them apply for funding that can help assist in the program. Because that is the, with a lot of the school districts, that's a piece that there aren't just folks sitting around wanting to write grants in elementary schools. Unfortunately, they're not staffed at that level, right? So any way that providers can help in that piece, I think would be a good way to look at funding as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's really good clarification, because I know there's several people on the call also who have the school garden coordinator lens in projects, and we're trying to build more and more capacity for school garden coordinators, because we know that schools have limited staffing to manage school gardens, but we know that experiential, day-to-day experiential capacity is really important with our program partners. So that's good clarification. I did see there was a question about when is the next OLG application going to be open?
That is a really good question, and we didn't mention that because we don't know yet. It all kind of depends on what happens at the legislature right now in terms of allocating funds for the program. There is a potential that we run it in advance of a final budget by the state, but that decision hasn't been made yet. If we do run an OLG grant application cycle, like within the next few months prior to the summer, we will make sure to broadcast it and get it out on everyone's networks so that all folks are aware. So although a lot of you already work with some of our grants on this call, some of you don't. And so we'll definitely make sure Jane gets notice of all these opportunities if they open up.
Thank you, that'd be great. And Mark said, anybody can write their legislator to promote this. We also know that the recess legislation is working its way through the system now too. So it's a good time to reach out to your local elected officials. Thank you for that. What other questions do we have for our panelists? Feel free to unmute yourself and chime in, please.
So someone asked, I didn't see who, but someone asked about the WNPS grant application process. And it is indeed, we do it once a year, and March 1st is the deadline for this year, for the coming year. So for both the education, conservation, and the research and inventory grants are all due by March 1st.
Still plenty of time. Get those grants in.
I'll add one other thing. I know I mentioned something about partnerships, and I would just encourage folks to really think about all of these funding opportunities and folks like Kyle and Beth and Jason as partners that reach out to them and build those relationships, like what Jason was talking about at their foundation. Is like, we get to learn a lot. We get to learn about how to grow and build our proposals in advance of submitting it, learn why we weren't successful if we weren't, learn a lot in the process about how to have a more competitive application in the future. And that's just super helpful. So just encourage folks to really look at all of these people at the grant programs as partners.
To piggyback off that, if I may, we are seeing a growing trend that I find very exciting in OLG and in CLI of collaborative applications. So one organization will act as the fiscal sponsor and the main applicant, but there'll be a lot of other applications, a lot of other organizations under that umbrella. And this is a great way to reach out to demographics that you don't have those relationships with, but other organizations have the trust of the families, and or to be able to offer other expertise in different areas, or to just bring in, like a lot of school gardens. There's one in Columbia who's successful year after year, and it's one garden community program, but they work with a lot of other organizations in the area and they support them in a lot of different ways. And this is just one of the ways that they collaborate. So super exciting, and happy to chat with anyone about that if you're interested another time.
That's a really great point. Thank you for that, Beth and Valerie. And I think one of the pieces of what Michelle and I are tasked to do over these 5 years is to learn who's doing what in our community to support youth but also look at where the gaps in services are. And we know there are more people that we want to reach, more families we want to reach, our BIPOC community, the various languages and cultures that we have in our community. There's still lots of work to do. So as we identify who might be the best to provide those services, that's where we might tap into these collaborative grant applications and reaching out to our local funders and working with Ann and Jason, especially hearing from you and what you're hearing from the donors on what programs they're looking for. We would love to hear what funders are looking to fund and looking at our partners within our coalition and how we might be able to match those partners together to get more kids safe and welcoming access outdoors.
Well, our donors fund a variety of things. So any issue area you can think of, they're funding it. And like Valerie said, we really are looking at working with nonprofits more as a partnership, collaborative. The more, like I said earlier, the more I know, the more I can pass along to our donors. So our program staff who manage our competitive grant making program versus myself that are working with our donor families and individuals, we both really try to work with nonprofits on that technical assistance piece. So for me, for donors, there's not necessarily, there isn't a grant application, but I work oftentimes with nonprofits on helping them put together a one-pager, an initial piece that I can use to provide information to somebody who may be interested in what you're doing, and give them enough information that they know, who you are, what you're doing, and, who you're serving and why, and who your partners are. And answer a lot of those questions up front, but leave enough for discussion. So that's really helpful to me. And we try to work with nonprofits as best we can to create those pieces that are the most valuable to our donors.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Jason, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ann said, that there's just so much out there, and as much as we want to fund everything, and I do want to put a disclaimer that as a trust, we are under new leadership with Romanita Hairston as our new CEO. She's been here for the last 6-7 months, and she made a comment recently to our staff that our hope is not to move in just one way of responding, though we have been doing capacity building for a long time. And I think COVID, as well as it done for a lot of foundations and funders and philanthropy, that nonprofits are certainly a lot stronger when they're doing the things they're really good at. And it is going to be more attractive, not just from a quantitative aspect, but I would say qualitative, to what are the levels of those partnerships that you're gathering. And for us at the trust, we just really want to know at the board level, how committed to you are these projects, that not all the time from that reciprocal standpoint, not all money is good money. We want it for it to fit your mission. And if you're just trying to do all these things for where the money is leading you to, that kind of deviates you and stretches you in a variety of ways, for good and for bad. So that's where we want to get an understanding where you're at. And if this is going to be put your best case forward, as that's our goal at the trust, is to put your best foot forward, whether it be grant making or through educating or through training, or maybe just pointing you somewhere else if it isn't here at the trust. So it's really a collaborative effort.
Thank you, Jason. That's really powerful. And Ann, I don't know if you'd ever meet a more dedicated group than this group on this call. They're doing some really amazing work, getting youth outdoors. It's really great work. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we have a couple of wrap-up slides. Anything else for our panelists today? I'm scrolling through the chat and didn't see too much more. Jared did add another grant through the Vancouver Audubon. Thank you for that, Jared. Did you want to say anything about that grant with the Audubon?
No, just the fact that I always forget that we have a grant program through Vancouver Audubon. So it is a very small grant, but all the details are on our website there.
Great, thank you. Okay. Any last questions for our panelists? I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. Bear with me.
I don't know if this is relevant, if this is the sort of thing, but I'm curious how many of these organizations have done the thing, Give More 24, that Community Foundation has helped a lot of nonprofits with this kind of one day, 24-hour online fundraising thing. I can't see anybody's hand, so I'll just say that, that's going away this year, and it's shifting to something called Give Big, which is like a statewide thing. And a lot of, our organization, Give More 24 was a big deal for us. And so we're all a lot of us are scrambling to pivot. So that's not grant writing, but it just might be something that's relevant to us because it's a Southwest Washington thing. And if we do it well, it's a way to bring in some money, some unrestricted money.
Yeah, that was I'm glad you brought that up, Ian. That was a program, or Give More 24 we did for nine or 10 years. And it was a really good way for some nonprofits to generate a pretty good revenue stream. And during COVID, it seemed like many of them pivoted, and that was their primary fundraiser for the year. And even though it's changing to a statewide platform, it's always been nonprofit driven. So the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And we're going to be doing everything we can to make it local. So all the social media, all the, the Columbian, I don't manage that program. Our marketing and communications people do, but hopefully, and this will be our first year through it, it's May 2nd and 3rd. Hopefully it will be just as successful, and it hopefully will give nonprofits more exposure because it is statewide. So time will tell, Ian. But we have certainly high hopes for it, and we have a lot of local partners that are putting in a lot of effort to keep that same feel to it that we've had in the past. And I'm still trying to, I'll still be raising matching funds from our donors. We have a lot of donors who love that program, and last year they committed almost $700,000 in matching funds to the event. So we'll see how successful I am this year in raising those funds. I'm in the process of doing that right now.
Well, that's fantastic, Anne. Thank you for that follow-up. Yeah, the donors to your organization, Anne, with Jason's work, is what they give back to the community is just immense, and we are so grateful.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're responding to the great work that the nonprofits do. So, we have some amazing folks here doing some great work. Yeah. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Just to wrap up, this information has been so valuable. This is recorded, so we will post this on our YouTube. So if you know of colleagues who were not able to join today, we will have this available, as well as some of our past presentations about accessibility or volunteer programs, etc. All those videos are available on our YouTube channel. I do want to encourage folks to register. This will be the one meeting that you have to register for our next month's partner meeting. It is, and this is my son, Jacob. He has a snow day today, so he's in the background. Thank you, Jake. Hang back, friend. Thank you. Please stop. Jake, please stop. Sorry. Our next partner meeting is with John Mears Laws. And if you're not familiar with John, he's out of the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and he is a nature journalist, and he provides training for environmental educators as well as teachers to connect students with learning. We heard from one of our partners recently that on a school field trip,
Because of COVID, students are really behind on their skills. And we know this through the math scores and the English language scores that we're seeing from the districts. Students have lost a lot of their skills and abilities, but nature journaling is a great tool for kids of any ability to track their observations and what they're seeing and making connections through observation on their through natural areas, etc. So I highly encourage you to register. I put the link in the chat for that meeting, so please register. We will also be sending this out to the teacher trainings that we're having. So Ian and Mark and Becca Martin have been providing a teacher training course for outdoor learning. Mark is up next week with our final in the series, and then it'll be perfect timing to follow up with John Muir Laws in March after we get these teachers going on how to teach outdoors. So we are grateful for John to be able to join us. We also are hoping to have some Indigenous partners join us for a conversation in April in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They do a lot of work in Ridgefield with our tribal partners. And then in May, we'd like to re-establish meeting out on sites. So if you have a site that you would like us to come and meet out on your campus, your nature center, etc., we would love to come join you at your site and do some networking of our partners out on your site. We're trying to line up a few of those for May, June, and August. We will not meet in July because everybody gets to go enjoy your summers. But so if you have a site you'd like us to visit, please let us know at hello@lowercolumbianaturenetwork.org. Michelle, what did I miss? I know what I missed. I missed the Padlets. Oh my gosh. I almost forgot the Padlets. So we also manage, Michelle, I'm losing my screens. Maybe you can put in the chat for us. We do use two Padlet tools, which are really simple digital whiteboards. One to track updates from your organization. So this is a great way to let the organization one or two things that are happening with your site and what you all are doing. And the second one is your upcoming events. And I saw the event calendar was busy this morning. Folks are posting lots of great events. Michelle pulls from both of those tools to put in our newsletter. So if you have things that you'd like to add to the two Padlets, she's adding those to the chat box right now. Feel free to go on. Those are always up. They're always available. So whatever timing works for you to update with either what your update is from your organization or any upcoming events. Events being family friendly, kid friendly, outdoorsy stuff would be great. We'd love to include those. I think that's all I had. Michelle, what did I miss? Anything? We're good? Okay.
I think you covered it.
Thank you. Once again, your panelists, we are so grateful for your time today. We know you are all super busy, but this is amazing information. We are grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to partnering with you in the future to get more kids and more families outdoors. Thank you.
Jane, I just had a question. The March 21st, is that partner meeting on Zoom while the educator day is in person at the Water Center? It's just on the same day, so I'm just making sure I'm tracking correctly.
It is on the same day, and Stacy and I talked about it, so that's why their meeting is ending at 3, and our meeting will be virtual starting at 4 with John, because John's in California. So that gives you an hour to get to a computer of your choice to join us for John's presentation. Thank you.
Okay,
good clarification.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Great to see you all. Ryan's here. Good to see you.